Hey, welcome.
Hi. We are live.
I'm going to give people a chance to join. How's the sound? I've asked for half martinis
Okay.
this time.
Just pace yourself.
Yeah.
Never before. First time for everything.
Hope everybody's getting their drink together to listen to this or watch this.
Whatever that drink may be.
Thank you so much. Ashley,
You're welcome.
cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, you. All right. Welcome, episode 5. Turn that off. Airplane mode. Episode 5 of Martinis with Scott. As I said, cheers everybody. And as usual, brought to you by Sinclair Range. Check out the website at sinclairrange.com. We are a management consulting firm that help management teams through transition. That could be high growth, it could be troubled companies, and the related investment banking if you're looking to sell your business or refinance your business, which is the topic today. That's what we do. SinclairRange.com, brought to you today from the Sinclair Range office in beautiful downtown Toronto. I think maybe 2 weeks ago I told you that this is Scotiabank Arena, where the Leafs will be beat out first round by the Bruins, and you can tell that my predictive abilities on that front were pretty good.
Didn't they lose in Boston?
They did.
Okay, so
But they could have won here.
that's true. But
And
they
they
didn't.
Exactly. My guest today is Olga Jilani, who is Vice President of Sinclair Range. And Olga, you have, well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
You have been a co-host
I
a
have.
couple of times
Mhm.
on Martinis with Scott. And every week you are integral. You help me do some research.
Yep.
Right? I say, here's what we're going to talk about. Can you give me some current events? You were on the panel with Rick Williams and Jay Richardson,
Mm-hmm.
where we talked about WSECO and junior mining issues.
Yep.
And do you want to, but I don't think I haven't been one-on-one with you yet. So we work together every day.
Yes.
You run the whole firm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do very much.
You said it, I didn't.
Exactly. Do you want to just touch
Sure.
on your career?
Sure, yeah. I started off in traditional investment banking. First I did Diversify, which has covered almost all the industries, anything from real estate to biotech. And then I switched over to the mining side, spent about over 2 years there when gold was $1,900 an ounce and the times were very, very good for the sector. I left in late February 2013 and I joined Sinclair Range in June of the same year, and we've been here ever since.
It's been about 6 years, right?
6 years.
And in that time, how many industries have you touched on?
Oh,
Everything?
I think we've definitely gotten into double digits.
Yeah. And you've worked on a number of financings
Right.
and a number of managerial turnarounds or managerial transitions,
Yep.
which is the two broad product lines
Yeah.
at Sinclair Range or service offerings.
And I think we're the only ones that offer both of those services, where we're not just one or the other.
I think there's firms that touch on it.
Okay.
I think you're right. It's not really a specialty. It's a managerial or management consulting firm that tries to do some corporate transactions on the side, or an investment bank that investment bankers will tell you they can do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But not all.
Yeah, exactly. And none of these people will step in and be an officer of the company or director of the
Never.
company. Right. So we're definitely unique in that way. In around 2006, I wrote an article on how to finance and refinance your troubled company. It was posted on the old firm's site at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the Sinclair Range site this morning, and I was surprised it wasn't sort of recast and reposted on Sinclair Range site. So I'll be doing that.
Great.
But it turned out to be really it was intended to be sort of 10 points on how to refinance a troubled business. And it turned out to be a bit of a manifesto, a Bible as to, how to approach these things. And, you've had a ton of experience now with us in doing turnarounds and working on that. And in fact, you just closed a financing of a troubled company with a Toronto specialty lender.
Yep.
You've worked on a lot of those, but was this the first one that, I think you just took this start to finish?
Yeah, the Rams, yeah.
Yeah, this is the first one.
This is the first one.
What'd you learn? What was your experience?
Definitely focus on closing, because the due diligence can just go on and on and on. Lawyers were great, I like them, but they, as any profession where it's billable by the hour, they can just keep billing by the hour, and they'll do that forever and hold you as a client and do a great job. But you have to streamline everyone and funnel everything to close. Let's push to close. You're the last piece to close, and oftentimes that's true. But pushing to close, or else it'll just never close.
Yeah. Okay.
Due to third parties or legal or the lender or the borrower, just keep pushing everyone to close.
Yeah. And you did a great job, by the way, thank you for that. So I wrote this article, as I said, the 10 points, and my thinking following the article, and don't forget this is 2006, so 7, 8, 9, for years I've been thinking, it'd be really cool. What I ought to do is take those 10 points into a roadshow and hit up towns like Windsor, Ontario in Canada, or Red Deer,
Alberta,
Columbus, Ohio, just sort of in the Midwest, where there's manufacturing concerns that might be struggling, and take this directly to entrepreneurs, owner managers, over a lunch or over a cocktail, sort of a 1-hour canned presentation. Bottom line is, it never got off the ground. Everybody thought it was a great idea, but we're always too busy doing other things.
Right.
One of my thoughts in starting with Martinis with Scott, the overall premise of Martinis with Scott is we're out for a drink, we're having a martini. It might be value added for people to listen in on some of the conversations that we would normally have.
You took it digital and took away the inconvenient travel factor of it.
Right, and having to go to the bar.
Country. Yeah.
But one of the other things I thought was exactly this sort of roadshow idea that I had from a marketing perspective, and maybe this is a great forum to do exactly the same thing digitally. And so on that front, we're going to launch today a series of podcasts, periscopes that may turn out to be 10, 11, somewhere in that range. There's 10 points, but we're going to do an introduction and 1 point today. Maybe we're going to go half an hour or 20 minutes per point. Maybe we go an hour, depends what we have to do. And then we'll do a wrap up at the end. So let's call it 10, 11 little episodes, of which this is the first on how to finance a troubled company. So here's the premise I want everybody to think about. Financing a troubled company is an entirely different issue than financing a stable company. Entirely different. And let's focus on getting financing from the bank, from a senior lender or a specialty lender that's going to be a senior lender, so a bank-like type facility. If you're a stable company, at the end of the day, bankers are looking for security. Right, so on a working capital loan, they want to have receivables, they want to have inventory, they want to have a floating charge over everything, but that's what they're margining. On a term loan, they're on the real estate with a mortgage or on the equipment, so they want to have security, and they want to know that if things go bad, they have some coverage on their security. So they're, a typical loan might be 75-80% on receivables, unless you're going with an asset-based lender, you can maybe get some higher margin, right? So we got security.
Got insurance,
they're looking for. They're looking for debt service coverage. Which means if you take your interest that you have to pay this year, if you take your principal payments or blended payments on a mortgage or a term loan, they want to know that you're making enough money to make those payments. And they want enough comfort to know that even if things dip a little, you still have enough money to make those payments. So they come up with, trailing ratios of financial covenants, debt service covenant ratios of 1.1, 1.2, whatever it is. And say, so basically you got my free cash divided by what your debt service is going to be this year, and they look for a ratio on that. And, if you're a stable business, that's, something you should expect to be doing. And a third leg to that lending stool, I would just broadly call integrity. So are management good people? Do they have a relationship with the financial institution? Is the quality of financial information good? Is it audited? Is it presented cleanly? There's just not a bunch of weird things going on the file. And that's if you're a healthy company.
Yeah.
That's what a banker's looking for. Well, I would argue that what the banker's looking for in a troubled company is more or less the same thing, right? They want to look for what their security is, and they want to understand that, and they want to understand what their debt service is. Can you afford to pay the interest on this? And they want to look for integrity and financial information in the management team. So those criteria haven't changed, but what's changed is if you just send out your financial information to the bank, any one of these banks up the street or the US, and you say, okay, well, there's my statements, and I have zero EBITDA for the last 2 years or negative EBITDA for the last 2 years, then you're done, right? Because the banker can't tick that box. So it's an entirely different issue. You need to tell a story. You need to tell that story both in person, in your CIMs. That would be your confidential information memorandum. In your projections, you have to paint a picture and tell a story for how you can cover off this lender on those points of integrity, debt service, and security. Tailored to what they're looking for, obviously. Do you have any thoughts on that so far? Have I covered it?
Yep, good so far.
All right. So that means that the entire distribution, when you're trying to sell this thing, is different from what it might be with a stable company. This whole idea, if you hire an accounting firm, for example, and they're corporate finance group, well, what are they going to do? They're going to put together a package of information that you provide them. They're not going to be experienced at telling a story that these 10 points are intended to drive. And they're going to rifle out this package to 50 possible lenders or 100 possible lenders throughout North America, right? And they're going to tell their client and whoever asks later down the road if the thing heads into receivership and they're in court and they have to sign an affidavit, they're going to say, we canvass the market. We talk to everybody that there is to talk to.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely true.
But what you said to them is probably not.
And it probably did the client no good. Right? Because you haven't created the story, you haven't created a sense of urgency, you haven't created a competition. So the whole, and the deal's not selling itself.
And absolutely no comfort for a lender.
Okay. So we're going to talk about 10 things for you to think about, as I said, over a series of periscopes and podcasts that serve as a roadmap collectively. And I'm just going to read to you what the 10 things are now, and then we're going to talk about one of them. So the first one is admit you're in trouble. And the essence of this one is to stop deluding yourself, because if you don't recognize that you're in trouble, even if you recognize it, if you don't tell people that you're in trouble, then it's hard to make the decisions that you need to make things better. And it's hard to convince a counterparty like a financial institution that they ought to take a bet on you because they just see you as deluding yourself.
Right.
Okay. And that's the one that we're going to talk about in more depth today. Number 2, identify the trouble and the people responsible for it. So that'll be the next podcast, and I think you'll have a lot to say about that. That's a favorite topic of yours.
Yeah.
But here's what I need you to think about when we get to that topic, is that 100% of the time in mid-market, smaller businesses, this is not a macroeconomic shift of whatever, right? It's not about commodity pricing. It's not about you lost your major contract. It's not about, revenue didn't grow the way we thought it was going to grow. It's about management. It's about management not reacting to those things. It's about management unwisely hanging their hat on the possibility of those things being different, right? It's a managerial decision. And whether you believe that's true or not, doesn't matter. You need to act as if it is true. And you need to make changes as if it is true. Because when you tell a story to the counterparty, part of the story has to be, we got in trouble here's how we got in trouble.
Yeah.
Here's what we're going to do about it, which is point number 3. Mm-hmm. Right? Here's the changes we are making because we recognize that things aren't going to be better next quarter if in fact we don't make changes. So that's point number 3. 4 is to document that into a written business plan and a monthly rolling model, which you do. What part of your day is spent on monthly rolling models, and the next point being 13-week cash flows?
Oh, half the day,
At
half
least,
the
right?
work, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, every single file that we get in, we build, those are our 2 main tools.
Yeah.
Right, a 13-week cash flow and our monthly rolling model.
Yeah.
Okay. Understand your security value. So this is, it's important to understand where you have leverage with a financial institution and where you don't, right? Mm-hmm. So you just closed a deal. Mm-hmm. We had bad EBITDA.
Yes.
At that company. Everything's improving, but we have bad EBITDA. Mm-hmm. Significant losses, mm-hmm. book losses, but we had lots of security. Tons of security.
Literally, physical, right? Tons.
Yeah. So it makes it easier for a bank to say, okay, I like these people. I believe in this turnaround plan. I believe in Sinclair Range, their advisors. Mm-hmm. And also my risk is not that much.
Yeah.
Because I have all this security.
I'm covered on so many things, yes.
Right. And so when you go out to market, you need to understand where you sit on that security issue. If you don't have any, it's a different lender, it's a different investor, it's a different sell. And if you have lots, you can go to different parties. It's going to affect your rate. It's going to affect how you go about things. So you need to understand that well. Understand the universe of lenders and lending structures. So many mid-market businesses don't know there's a whole universe of specialty lenders out there that love this type of product. And it's not just senior lenders. There's private equity and different types of mezz, unitranche type funds. They want to lend, they want to buy, they want to partner. There's a lot of money available in this space if you only know what this space is.
And part of it is that a lot of that money, people see interest rates being higher for troubled companies, which makes sense, right? The higher the risk, the higher the reward to the lender. The theory gets scared off, well, I'm just going to be stuck paying that and I'm never going to get to, a big bank level interest rate. And it's like, well, no, and first of all, it could be temporary if your plan takes off and you get your head above water and you become attractive to top tier lenders. And then on top of that, if it's temporary and the lender's aware of that. Your current lender's aware that they will be replaced. So they're familiar with the flow of a relationship, especially if the business becomes successful.
It's their business model.
Yeah, they know that they're not there forever.
Right. So you you take a good mid-market business with lots of security. In today's market, the bottom end that you're going to pay is 10, 11%, somewhere in that range, and don't expect to get 10, 11%. I mean, that's really, if you're a troubled business, that's the low end.
Yeah.
You might be paying 16, 18%. You might be with a factoring company paying 30, 35%.
Sure.
And so that's actually my next point here is expect to pay more. And the essence there is that availability is king. You have to have some cash to effect a turnaround most of the time, right? And you need to expect to pay for that cash. But the flip side to that is you have an opportunity to turn your business around and you're not giving your business away.
Right.
Right? You're not going through a formal procedure. You're not selling it. You're not diluting yourself. You're not flipping the assets out to a strategic investor/competitor that knocks you out of the business. And so I always encourage clients to say, okay, this is not, say, 15% money. This is money that's 10% more expensive than it should be for a year while I implement my turnaround.
And I actually really like your explanation. Go on,
right?
yeah.
So on a $10 million loan, let's say, or $20 million loan, that's $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, that's a fee, right, to have access to this capital, to give me an opportunity to set things straight.
Yep.
You can never expect to pay those rates for a prolonged period of time, but it's part of the fee. That's what it is. And you have a chance to save your business. And I think if a business owner, a CEO, an executive team views it from that perspective, 100% of the time they say that makes a lot of sense. If I know I have this availability and I have the opportunity to execute on my plan and then to get out of this high cost of capital, maybe not all at once, right? Maybe I'm going to go from 15% to 10% to 8% to 5%.
Because you can't split in terms of term loans against equipment and lending against operating lines against inventory and AR. But you can split those and you can slowly kind of work your way out of it.
Right, so we took over a troubled business in southwestern Ontario, and we did the initial transaction when it was significantly in trouble and took out the senior bank, and we did that with about 15% money. And we had lots of availability, and we got things turned around, and they weren't awesome, but they were a lot better than they were.
Right.
And then we moved to around 11% money, with more availability.
Which was a lot. That's a big, if you think of in dollar amounts, that was a big jump. Like you think of just 4%, but on the amount that it was a substantial amount of cash.
And then a couple of years went by and things would continue to get better. And then we moved into, we had lots of possibilities of 8% money, but we ended up selling it to a private equity group as a bolt-on acquisition. And they lowered the cost of capital further, obviously, with their sponsor relationship. So there's an example where you don't go from high yield to normal banking all at once. There's steps along the way, if that's what you need. So expect to pay more, expect to report more.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of what troubled companies do is they start cutting their finance department, which is a big mistake, because when you're in trouble, you need to over-report most of the time. And the last one is consider other options. What I mean by this is maybe you should just be selling.
Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the reporting. How often do you run into a situation where you see not even adequate reporting in a troubled company? You don't even know where to start with.
Approaching 100%.
Okay.
Right, and I'm not trying to draw a correlation between bad reporting and troubled companies, although I'm sure one exists. But I think that almost 100% of mid-market and smaller businesses, when they're doing well, have inadequate reporting.
Okay.
And it's the last thing on their mind. Okay, and then when things start to go bad,
when the cash flow starts,
magically improve their reporting to deal with that. Right. In fact, it might go the other way. So it's not saying, well, you had bad reporting and therefore you're a troubled company. It's you probably had inadequate reporting and you were doing well, so you didn't care. And you don't even know anyways.
Right.
You don't know what good reporting is because it's not your expertise. Right. So you have, and it doesn't really matter because you're a success. And then when things start to go bad, the inadequate reporting becomes a serious issue.
Because people finally start asking questions. There's things to question.
What is in that line item?
Yeah.
Why has it gone up 20%? I don't know.
And then stating all the time, you're constantly getting different versions of the March statements. That I see that a lot, because putting together the models, you see the financial statements just constantly stating.
All right, so those are the 10 items that we're doing this introductory one right now. We'll tackle the first point right now, and then maybe once a month or however we fit it in, we're going to cover the rest of these. I did this post, as I said, this article in 2006, and one of the comments on the old site was from probably the best business development guy associated with a high yield fund that sells to troubled companies. Probably the best in the world.
Okay.
I don't know anybody. I've been around a long time. I don't know anybody who's better.
And it's a global group, so it's not like we met them in Canada and we.
So this was his comment back. And, he's a friend, so he's trying to be helpful. But it says, you've captured the essence of what every struggled company needs to understand when things are going rough. The number of times I've seen paralysis in a business due to management's fear of not knowing what to do, or the eternal next quarter, everything will be better silliness, which just makes doing the deal tougher. The only other point I would make is that when businesses are incredibly resilient for a period of time, when you pass that period, although businesses are incredibly resilient for a period of time, when you get past that, enterprise value deteriorates quite rapidly. Mm-hmm. So his argument is you kind of get trouble cliff, right? You just hit the wall. Just like going to the doctor when you're ill, a company should consult with a firm like yours to get the appropriate medicine to get well.
Yep.
Right. So a little confirmation from the market. And look, at Sinclair Range has had great success refinancing these troubled businesses because we treat it differently. And it's a unique market. The same people that are great at financing a stable company are not the same people that are great and understand financing a troubled business or a high growth business.
Right, because in both the situations, there's unique issues that management sometimes tries to either sidestep or doesn't see as being issues until the lender brings them up. So I think what we're very good at, just looking back at this, deal, because it's fresh in my mind, that there were issues, not necessarily problems, but something that a lender would have questions about, and we brought it up before the lender did. And not only did we describe it, we had details on it, we had a plan around it.
That's a good point.
Right? That we identified them as problems and we had a solution. So, but not only is that part of having a plan, that's part of integrity, right? That gives a lender comfort that they're working towards transparency. This is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. If there's a problem, we're going to hear about it. If there's a problem, they've already thought about it and they've already come up with a plan. It might not be our top, it would not be their favorite scenario, but at least there's something that we can work with here.
Yeah.
That we're a proactive management team.
And if you come back to the cash flow, security, management integrity, I mean, you just hammered home that last point, management integrity, but it also allows them to buy more into the cash flow, which is at that point projected cash flow, not actual cash flow, right?
And for us, with those two things that I wanted to mention that kind of got pushed over, that was that we don't just create those models; we share them with our lender.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's a big one. That is not just for internal controls. We share our projections. We have assumptions to back it up. Like if we're gonna fix labor, for example, we have solutions to it, whether it's an alternative or better training,
or maybe not even a solution yet, because I have one right now where some lenders are saying, well, okay, well, what's your solution for this? Right, you need to cut this expense line, or your own model says you're going to cut this expense line by 20%, or you're going to save 5% on freight. It's like, I don't know, I'm not there yet. I don't have a solution. What I do know is I have a solution for these other things, and that I need to change that line item, or this is going to work for me.
Right.
Right. So I've set the objective. I'm digging into it, but don't make stuff up.
Right.
You're not expected to have all of the answers right now, 100% right.
Yeah.
You're not. Right. You're understanding and presenting the fact that you have issues, and that you have a plan in some instances that are really specific, and you have a plan that in some instances are general. Just be straight up about it.
Yeah.
Just be straight up. I don't know the answer to that one, but we do know we have to do it. Here's how we're going about the work.
Right.
Right. And here's why I think there's an opportunity for savings there.
Exactly.
Right. All right. So the first item on the list was, which we just started down, was admit you are in trouble.
Yeah.
What percentage of troubled, not just clients, but companies, so that could be clients, companies we've run into, some that you've heard about or read about, what percentage of those would you say that the executive team or the ownership of the board really haven't mentally and in their souls dealt with the fact that they're in financial trouble?
100%, but for me, I mean, the ones that I've dealt with, I mean, obviously they get funneled through to me, but of those 100, I think maybe 80% is because they don't think it's a problem. They don't actually think they're in trouble, like honestly, sincerely, and 20% because it's an ego thing.
Right.
There's no way that I could have put a company in this situation, right? There's no way that my plan didn't work. And a lot of that, I think, just part of human nature is that, and I think we kind of communicate this, that you're not special. You make the same mistakes everyone else does. You have oversight that everyone else does. You're not immune to the things that your competitors are suffering from, or people just in business generally have issues with, whether it's labor or materials or proper management or reporting. You're not special. You need to accept that, and that's that 20%.
So my experience is not 100%.
Okay.
So if I were to try to put percentages on this, I would say that 80% of management teams, owners, directors, just don't see themselves as being in serious trouble, that there's an imminent solution coming right around the corner. They don't really need to change, they just need to stick it out. Right? Maybe 15% drive that thought process right into bankruptcy. They just never, ever, ever get it through their minds that that they were in trouble. Rather, it's more just a whole unfairness issue, right? The world's being unfair to me.
Right.
The market's being unfair to me.
I'm special.
I'm not special. I'm just right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they're
There
treating
you
me
go.
unfairly, right? They just drive it so it's not. That's not everybody, but it's a healthy. It's the 15%, and then 5% do what I think you ought to do, which is to recognize up front. So we're working with a group right now, with a company right now, and one of the reasons I love working with this client is exactly that, right? That's got an owner manager who had said, you know what, we're obviously not doing something right, and has pushed the ego aside, has pushed this throughout the organization, and is willing to have an open discussion about how to change things, and then actually does it.
I don't have all the answers, but I'm open to hearing.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's terrific. So it's not 100%, but it's a lot. That's my experience.
So for me, the companies that I deal with get funneled from you to me, so I only get that portion.
And only after I'm frustrated with them.
Precisely, yeah.
Fair enough. So this ego thing. Let's talk about some of the reasons this happens. To me, cognitive bias, as you know, is one of my favorite concepts right now. I'm on the bandwagon, and I think it's a huge issue, right? So what is cognitive bias? It's a mistake in reasoning, evaluating, remembering, or other cognitive processes, often occurring as a result of holding on to one's preferences and beliefs, regardless of the contrary facts and information. So, in other words, we start with the answer.
Yep.
And then we seek facts to support our answer, and we ignore facts that do not support our answer. That's a short form. Or we interpret facts, and we rationalize them to support the answer that we want. What is the answer that these executives and management teams want? The answer is, it wasn't us.
Yeah.
Our methodology, maybe with some tinkering, but our methodology works. Our product and service is great.
Yeah.
Customers are going to want it.
The delivery's awesome.
Delivery's awesome. We're better than competitors. And they seek out facts and reasoning to support that. Which I think is the same thing as you saying ego. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah?
Feelings.
Right. So there's something that you need to be aware of and you need to overcome if you're going to admit that you're in trouble. Another issue that I think drives this problem is I have found it is really, really difficult as a CEO, president, someone just in charge of this company that's struggling. You need to go out and sell. You need to talk to customers. You need to talk to the financial community. You need to talk to prospective customers. You need to talk to suppliers. You need to convince suppliers to take a chance on you and supply goods. Maybe you're not able to pay them today. And to be able to sell, you have to be positive. You have to believe in what you're saying and where you're going. Yet at the same time, to affect change, you have to admit to yourself that you've got serious trouble. This is not working. And you need to be ruthless and focused on hard changes.
Yeah. Unrelenting realist while still staying optimistic.
Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really, really difficult thing for an owner manager executive to do. And I think it takes a unique individual. I'm not saying I've ever met those people, because I have. I like to think I'm one of them. I think that's why I'm a little bit successful in this industry and doing a good job turning around. Thank you. But it's hard, right? And then if you add on that the stress, right, of being failure, of being the one taking the phone calls and unsure whether you're going to make payroll this week, you add those stresses onto that. You've seen people melt.
And yet you got to drive morale, right?
Yeah. And then I think a third issue that comes forward is where do you draw that line? What is the balance between persistence and not wanting to be a quitter versus admitting that this is a failure and you need to change something?
Do you think part of it is just setting up stretch goals? Like, I'm giving myself a year to fix it. This is my plan for the year, and I have a certain goal to reach by the year.
Yeah.
And if I don't reach it, then you gotta close up shop. Like, that's, you gotta know.
Well, I don't know if close up shop is the right answer.
Or at the very least, change your plan.
Well, I think at the end we're going to talk about what are the solutions to some of this, and the solution is to focus on numbers, to focus on hard metrics, right, and to have outside advisors.
Okay.
Someone who does not have that cognitive dissonance, right?
That emotional attachment to the...
Someone who doesn't have that stress. Separate out this positive person from the negative person, if I can put it that way, the person that has to deal with the day-to-days. So when we go into a troubled company, particularly a financially troubled company, what I try to say to them is, look, we're not going to succeed if we're not selling.
So what can you define, being financially troubled versus troubled in some other way? Like, what would be it?
Operationally. So sometimes the company is great operationally, but was undercapitalized from day one. Or maybe not from day one, maybe there was a recap and they took too much money off the table and whatever, then they didn't have any equity comfort when things took a blip for a year, right? So they're doing okay day to day, but they're, from a working capital perspective, they're not very good. Yeah. Sometimes you have the reverse scenario. Lots of money available. Yeah. Right? But they just lose money. Right? So the shareholders put in more money, or there's also leverage available from the fund that owns them. Yeah. Right? But this thing just ticks along forever or starts going over a cliff. Bleeds slowly. Right? And it's not from a lack of funds. It's from a lack of execution or a bad plan or something. But often we see both. Yeah. Right? But it doesn't have to be both, is my experience. And so what I try to say to clients is, look, let's list all of the crap that you need to deal with every day. Right? The nasty phone calls, the extra reporting, the stress of this, the stress of that, talking to your people, laying off, deciding not to pay. I'll do all that for you. You need to go sell. Yeah. And be happy. Right? You need to believe in our plan and you need to sell. Because if you're not selling, we should all just go home. Right. Right? So often that's the right thing to do. It doesn't have to be through our firm. Right? You could divide this up within your management team, right? I'm going to deal with the happy things and you're going to deal with the unhappy things. Yeah. Right? To sort of divide out those emotional responses that people have to go through. But that's jumping to the end. So you've seen lots of examples of all of this. Do you have any you want to touch on right now, or
we hear a lot, and I listed some of my favorites. To your point about financial reporting, where somebody entrusts either an accountant or just like a controller to deal with everything. So when you talk to the management team, they'll say they're fine. They'll say something like, "We're making money. I mean, our accountants, we have great accountants. Let me tell you about our accountants. We are making money. The cash just isn't there."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why is there just this ginormous distance between net income and cash? I mean, and a lot of it is that could be the case but you know, a business like yours should be generating something to cover payroll. Like, it's accountants, they don't really understand. So sometimes management is not close enough to the financials. Either they're not reviewing them, or they're just trusting somebody who's not keeping the standard, and they deal with that. The other one that I like is that they will admit they're in trouble, but they're always one sale away, this one big client next month, and we'll be fine. And it's going to make it.
So much of that.
Oh, and that's we hear that all, like, once a week, right? Like, you will come in contact with someone who will say that. But when you actually look at them, you know, the margins are weak on every client. There's no reason why this one will be different from the rest.
Yeah.
And the overhead is massive. So when you actually plug that in as a sale potentially for next year, it doesn't really get them out of the hole at all. And they think about, you know, hiring more to service them, whatever else. My other one, you know, you talked about.
That's an interesting point. I haven't really thought about that before, but it happens all the time, right? So I'm in trouble. I should have had this deal closed, a new sale, a new customer last quarter.
Yeah.
Or 6 quarters ago. And it's going to happen tomorrow. And then it's going to happen tomorrow. And that goes on for another couple of quarters. And then 2 years later, you actually land the account. Mm-hmm. But when you do, you brought yourself from -100 to -10. Mm-hmm. Like, it hasn't solved the problem at all. And
you don't have a follow-up solution
you
to
don't.
make up
You're
for
right,
the
because
-10.
you just bet the farm on this issue. That's not going to help.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it helps. It allows you to drag on for another couple of years. No, that's an interesting point. I see it all the time. I think about it, but I've never actually written that in something or talked about it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One is, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs believing in their product, but a lot of them don't believe in their competitors or drastically underestimate them. So they'll refuse to recognize their competitors exist, which will drive them to not actually compete. You know, a lot of the companies we deal with actually had success for X amount of years, and then for some reason sales fell off, margins fell off, whatever happened, and they still live in yesteryear where they were the brand leader and whatever they were, and the competition just ramped up in areas that they didn't even explore before.
I have never, in my entire career, met a troubled company that has a marketing strategy, that understands who its competitors are, where they fit on pricing, the offering that they have, how they distribute, how they do their promotion. There's my 3 C's and my 4 P's. Never. They just don't know. They have their gut feel. They go, oh, you know, XYZ does this and something else. They can sometimes list to you companies that they think have similar propositions, but there's been no analysis. And what they fail to think about it, you know, how many times do clients or troubled companies tell you, well, we don't really have a competitor? I mean, you're bringing this from the tech. You're bringing this from the technology point of view. And you hear that in tech all the time. Well, it's a new offering.
Or our closest competitor, you know, is like, their success rate's like 80% and whatever, that we're doing at 100. You're like, oh, well, you know, they're stable and they're doing sales and they're doing fine.
Right.
You're tech, you're saying, you know, the numbers speak for themselves. It comes down to the numbers.
And what they don't understand is that this is not you versus your competitor. It's how the customer perceives you versus what they're doing right now, which may be buying from a competitor, but it may not be. Maybe they're doing nothing. Maybe they're quite happy doing nothing. Right? And that's what they miss out on. We should do a podcast on that someday.
Good point.
One of my favorites.
And one of the things that I wanted to just start off with, I think this, I think I verbalized it nicely on my little points here, is that even when when we have convinced a company that there is a problem, and we start kind of digging in going through the profit and loss statement, right?
Yeah.
And you know, we hit a point of suppliers. And a lot of the time, the answer we get, probably not as eloquently as this, is it's not a problem, because there is no solution. This is the only way to do things. This is like we've met industrial manufacturers. Well, they'll say, well, this is the only supplier for this.
Always.
And they'll be like, in China. I'm like, I can honestly go on Alibaba.com and find 10 more.
Yeah.
In minutes, right? And they'll all email me a quote, mail me a sample, and everything else, right? And they're real. They're review. They've been around for years. Like, these are real companies, not any less real than the guy you have now. And this is the only freight company that can work with me. Why is your advertising cost so high? Well, this is what TD ads cost. It's like, well, have you ever heard of Instagram and Facebook and Google ads and YouTube ads and other ways to get yourself out there?
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, it's not a problem because there is no solution. This is the only way to get things done.
Yeah. And so that sort of leads into the major point about this admitting that you're in trouble. If you, as an executive or owner, can come to the realization that you need to change, and not just your business, but probably you, like as a person, in this situation. It's not to say you're a bad person, but in this situation, it's not being effective. You need to change. When you admit that, everything else becomes easy.
And the people we're talking about are not bad. They're not unintelligent.
Right.
These are, at some point they had enjoyed success. It just things have changed.
But let's say you've got a sales guy. You're head of sales, and sales is going not great, or it's going bad, and that's the primary driver of the trouble. I mean, you would argue that in the light of sales not going well, you ought to cut costs.
Yeah.
And so that's your failure to do that is a driver of trouble. But you're blaming the sales guy, right? Which is probably fair, at least in part, right? If you don't think you're troubled, if you think things are going to fix themselves relatively shortly, and the next order is going to come in the door, and things are going to start taking off like a rocket ship,
yeah,
do you fire that fellow?
Of course.
Right? You really don't. I mean, but if you realize you're in trouble and this isn't working, it just makes that decision easy, right? And so if the right decision was to fire him, then by not admitting that it's not working to yourself, you delay making the proper decision to start healing this organization. And I'm an expert at this, but I do that, right? Because it's hard. None of this is easy. It's hard.
And we're not saying it is, right? It's not super simple. We're just distilling it to what the questions to ask.
Right, and that ties into what you just said about it's not really a problem because it's the only thing we could do, so it's not even worth talking about. You get invested in this one person, or in this approach to things, and you just think, well, that's not even, I can't even do that. I can't go to that person. This person knows everything about the organization.
Yeah, they know all about the product, they know about the market, they know all the buyers.
There are no other solutions, right? But if it's not working, if you admit to yourself it's not working, if you believe in your heart that it's not working, it just makes the decision so much clearer. And that's for firing people, for focusing on some things and on others, for divesting, for investing, who to pay, not to pay. How many times do you see companies that are in serious financial trouble pay the loudest vendor rather than the vendor that is going to ship goods that you need today and could turn into revenue and a receivable and make some money on that trade today?
So the response we get all the time, but the response we get is that it's unethical not to pay them. We've had a relationship for 20 years. I know the guy personally, right? It's always that. But what we're suggesting, and we've done this for clients, manning these phone calls for collections, is to say, and a lot of entrepreneurs haven't even heard of this, is that a payment plan.
Right.
Companies will, most of them, not all of them, will work with you.
What's unethical? Let's just take the unethical off the table. What's unethical is incurring more credit that for a fact you're not going to pay. I mean, that's clearly unethical.
Yes.
What is unethical is having, false conversations with people that you owe money to, which is a hard thing not to do because you're stuck. You're not sending out a bunch of financial information and having things go to lawsuits, and so you're trying to say, well, we're working on this, we're working on that. So that's a difficult thing to do. But I mean, clearly, those two things would be unethical. Saying to a supplier that I have $100 and I owe you $100, though you haven't supplied anything to me in a year, it's not your fault. I haven't bought anything from you in a year. And I also owe this fellow over here $100, and I could have goods from him today that I could turn into $150 tomorrow, and so that's where I'm going to spend my money today.
Yeah.
That's not unethical, right? I mean, that's just trying to save your business.
That's letting the supplier make the decision for
Yeah.
you.
And so, but what these companies always do is, because they haven't admitted that they're in trouble and they haven't recognized they need to make the hard decisions to get out of trouble, is they respond to the loudest noise. Right?
Yeah, the squeakiest wheel.
Yeah. All right.
Do you want another martini? It's martinis.
I would like another martini.
I'll just have some more.
Since I'm drinking half martinis.
Yeah.
What are we drinking today? Tito's?
We are having Tito's classic vodka martini.
Awesome.
We should let Tito's know on Twitter and Instagram that their product is being promoted all over Toronto and worldwide via the information.
Ashley tells me this has no gluten.
Oh, okay.
It's made with corn.
Because it's made with corn.
I thought it was made with potatoes. How is it
It's made with corn.
Most
Potatoes.
vodkas are not made with potatoes. It's very, very expensive.
We're learning
Because
so
potatoes are expensive.
It's usually wheat or rye or corn.
Is there a potato vodka?
Yes, lots. But just not, it's not most of the market though.
Or are we just drinking cheap vodka?
No,
Do you have a problem? Do you want to admit?
Yeah. If your podcast is serving you bad booze,
Yeah.
that's a sign, right? Definition of a troubled company.
Precisely. Nothing changes if nothing changes. There's one type of vodka on the market. There's no solution.
That's right.
Like in the USSR.
In Fernie, BC, they have a distiller.
Do they? Okay. I'm shocked.
It's
But
a
it
small
wasn't
town.
converted to like,
Yeah, and the vodka is outstanding.
okay. Oh yes.
As
We're
is the
going
gin. So I would like a sponsorship from them.
Mhm.
You know, a hometown for me. Cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Water.
All right. What else is on your list? I have a little bit more. How are we doing for
Let's
time?
keep going with yours.
Holy shit, we've almost been an hour.
I know. This is going to be half an hour.
20 minutes.
We're only like one martini in.
That's good.
That's fine.
Last
time's
week
up
I
for
was
them.
here with Mathers, and Ashley was pouring me, what were they, 10 ounce, 12 ounce?
Probably 10 ounce martinis.
10 ounce
It was just the
martinis.
Ventis and
And,
Starbucks cups, yeah. That was a great
And Chris-
podcast, though.
Chris wasn't drinking.
No,
Otherwise, we would have had better stories.
they were great stories.
He was great.
It was fantastic.
And we have him on a client right now,
Mm-hmm.
and he's done an outstanding job. Absolutely
Of
outstanding.
course.
Right? Not just for theft prevention, but we're looking at operational support.
Yeah.
Through a camera system, because we have multiple locations and people sort of sitting out there.
Yeah, I heard about the surveillance system that is in place now behind pipes and such. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great. It's that's on the website now, right, Ashley?
It is.
Go to sinclairrange.com, episode 4 with Chris Mathers, and check that out because it's he does a great job and he's a good friend.
Great friend.
And it's fun. It's a good podcast.
Yeah, and it's good. It's good for corporations and individuals. He has great advice to share.
Yeah.
For both.
All right. I have a little bit more. What's on your list?
I'm good. I think I've exhausted mine almost completely.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what we're going to talk about just to close here is what do you do about this issue? If you have cognitive bias,
Mm-hmm.
you're the type of person that's not a quitter, right? You just keep banging your head against the wall.
Maybe just make it a different
I
spots
don't
on
know
the
what
wall
the
because they're
end
softer.
of that metaphor is, but you just keep banging your head against the wall. You are a happy, energetic, motivated salesperson, and you just can't deal with the other side of, you can't face the negativity in your business or your life. What do you do about that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, what are tips and helpful ways to recognize that you're in trouble?
Mm-hmm.
You want to provide some thoughts on that? Or?
So I think for one, I understand that in bigger companies, management can't have a hold on the financials. It's almost segregated, which it shouldn't be. But I'm a big believer that if you, first of all, are owner manager, then you should be familiar, maybe not with the accounting policies, but at least the cash flow. That's basic arithmetic. You don't need a degree in anything else to understand that. But do that yourself.
Right.
And I think you can trust a lot of people, but nobody loves your money more than you. So you need to watch your own cash, whether you're a shareholder loan or your equity position. It doesn't even matter. Whatever the large amount of money is to you, watch it yourself and start going through that and get involved in that. You mentioned in quarterly meetings, but do that on a daily basis. You should be looking at your bank account daily.
People always give me a hard time for personally doing the 13-week cash flows of our clients or companies that we're running. And I don't always do them personally.
Sometimes I do them too, just so we're clear.
Yeah, but but it's an interesting point. When do I ask you to do those? Let's say it's my file.
Mm-hmm.
When do I ask you or Kate or somebody else in the firm to take over the 13 cash flow? The answer is when I feel like I know what's going on for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, right? But not until then, because the only way that I have a really good handle on what's going on and where we're losing the cash and how we're getting the cash in is by doing those numbers myself. Because I think that's just the nature of how people think, and everybody thinks differently, but it's not the output of the model that matters, it's the thought process in building it that matters, right? Because there's a historical piece that you'll learn by putting in the numbers, but there's also the projected piece. And it's the thought process of putting that all together that teaches you. This is what this business is about. This is how this is working. Here's what's going wrong. Here's an idea as to how to change that.
Because ultimately your name is on it. If you're just taking out the advisor piece, right? If you're an owner manager and you put it together, you're probably a little bit more immune to oiling this wheel to paying the guy who you don't need right now as a supplier. I mean, when you start managing your own money as opposed to somebody you hired who's a 9 to 5, you're going to get a lot more results. And and you know what? Do it even before you're in a troubled position, whether you want to admit it or not. But when things are good, still manage it. It's rewarding. It's nice to see a healthy bank account balance. Let that be a motivator, whether it's continue to do the positive or to manage the negative.
So to me, that's a subset of a broader point, which is focus on numbers. So it's not on my 10 points, but we've got a separate post. We'll probably do a separate podcast on key metrics, right? Because at the end of the day, businesses can be really detailed and complicated, but they also run on 3 or 4 or 5 key metrics.
KPIs,
Right, KPIs. That's what the post is about, and we should do one on KPIs, but you know what they are as an executive team, as a manager. But much like what you just said about 13-week cash flow, if you've gotten in the habit of letting other people report these things to you, and so it's month end, you go, oh wow, my margin on this product is less than I thought. I thought my direct materials were 53%, they came in at 56%, right? First of all, it's too late. And second of all, you have no detail or understanding as to why that's true, okay? So set out your KPIs, monitor their direction, okay? If they keep going in the wrong direction, you're a troubled company. If you're not doing anything about it, you're a troubled company. I think that's a definition. And then my other point, so you focus quantitatively on things that don't require judgment, right? Like, I'm going to get a sale in next quarter that fixes everything. That's judgmental, right? But looking at very recent history on KPIs is one way to break that cognitive bias loop, okay? And the other, as I talked about earlier in this, is just separate your various roles, get outsiders with a different perspective, and value those outsiders. And so One way is to do that with a consultant like us, and I'm not trying to pitch that you have to come to us. Set up a board of directors, set up an advisory board, right? Get your professionals, get your accountant, your lawyer, your banker, your friends, people that are just like anybody that's got common sense.
But you know what?
That you trust and can listen to.
But a question that arises is, you get somebody, say you were in apparel manufacturing, just as an example. We don't have an apparel manufacturing client, so perfect. We have had, but not currently.
Yes.
That, people will say, well, you need other apparel manufacturers, somebody who has experience in it. You did a really good blog post and included a link to a much more detailed article about how choosing an advisor in a turnaround situation, it doesn't really matter if these people have experience within your industry for a variety of reasons.
Correct.
But one that stood
better
out,
if they don't.
It's better that they don't. Because they can come up with interesting perspectives and borrow some sort of parallels.
And because of groupthink. Like the whole point of this is breaking that cognitive bias.
Yeah.
If you have a room full of energy people on an energy turnaround, and all they have to say is, wow, this industry sucks right now.
Yes.
That was unhelpful.
Yeah. And the part of it is that if an industry is doing well and you're, the lone wolf that's not, then perhaps you want an outsider's opinion because you're not in a typical energy situation, you're in a typical apparel manufacturer situation anyway, so what do you need more advice from those people for? You're in an atypical situation, just get something in the door, get smart people in the door.
Yeah. So try to separate out roles, get outside opinion, look for any way to break this cognitive bias. Just recognize that cognitive bias is not a failing. It exists everywhere, with everybody, right? Look at politics today.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is driven by cognitive bias. You have it. Get somebody with different opinions, listen to those opinions, and trust them and break that cycle. That's going to help you. Okay?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. How are we doing on time?
Just exercise.
Good.
Anything else?
No, I think it was great. We covered everything.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to cut this off.